just was a significant, powerful thing for me this week. And so thank you for joining me in that, and I hope that it was a good reminder to you as well of this amazing, amazing grace. May we never lose the wonder of it. Well, we are going to do something a little bit different this morning, and I asked you last week if you would please come this week. By the way, Happy New Year, 2015. What's that? You as well. Thank you, thank you. I asked you last week if you would come prepared to share some testimonies, kind of twofold. I would ask this, that you would share testimony that is specific to what you want God to do on a spiritual level in your life in 2015. I'd really like to make this amount of money or start a business or anything of that sort. Maybe you have those goals. But what do you want God to do in your life on a spiritual level this year? And also, actually to share testimony of 2014 and maybe some things that you saw God do in your life. Some things that you witnessed, answers to prayer, or opportunities that you had, or growth that you experienced. And then the third thing was that you might share things that you want us to just pray for. In 2015, how can we keep you in prayer? And so, be thinking about that. I wanted to just share a few words from God's Word, more of a devotional than anything else, just to kind of put into perspective, I hope, this testimony time. And you're welcome to join along, but Mark chapter 10 is the text that I was going to read from. And I just want to very, very quickly point out three things that I wanted to kind of just, again, put into perspective our time in testimony. Then we're going to sing some songs and bring some more praise to God, and then I'm going to give you an opportunity to share testimony. But Mark chapter 10 is that familiar story. Probably most of us have heard it. Jesus is walking and heading into Jericho, and there was a blind man. Anybody remember his name? A blind beggar. Yell it out if you know his name. What's that? Nope. What's that? Bartimaeus. Blind man Bartimaeus. And what was Bartimaeus doing? Anybody remember? Sitting by the road, doing what? Begging. Just begging. And just you can picture the scene. Probably had some sort of jar and probably some, I'm just kind of guessing, maybe some ratty clothes, and maybe he stumbled a little bit, and he's sitting by the side of the road and he's begging. Alms for the poor, would you give me something? And so as the story goes, he sees or hears that Jesus is near, and he says these words, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." And then, what happened? Anybody remember? What did the crowd do? Told him to be quiet. The Bible says they rebuked him, leave him alone, in other words. He's got more important things to do, was really their attitude, sadly. But he cried out all the more, "Son of David, have mercy on me." And Jesus stopped and called and said, "Call him, bring him to me." And they called the blind man, saying to him, "Take heart, get up, he is calling you." And throwing off his cloak, he sprang up and he came to Jesus. And here is, I think, without looking at it a little more closely, kind of a bewildering statement that Jesus makes, or question. Jesus said to him, "What do you want me to do for you?" Here's a blind man. He's sitting by the side of the road, probably with a cup with a few coins in it, and Jesus asks him the question, "What do you want me to do for you?" We're going to come back to that, but I think that's an odd question. And the blind man said to him, "Rabbi, let me recover my sight." And Jesus said to him, "Go your way, your faith has made you well." And immediately he recovered his sight and followed him on the way. Let me ask you, don't you think that a blind man sitting at the edge of the road begging, don't you think his request would have been somewhat obvious? What do you think he wanted to do? Without even ever hearing his response to Jesus, what would you assume his response, or his request would be for Jesus? What would you assume? Yeah, give me my eyesight. Why do you think Jesus asked the question? And we're just kind of surmising here, just kind of guessing, but I think I know why. Why do you think Jesus said, "What do you want me to do?" Anna?
To see if he would have faith.
Okay, to see if he would have the faith, and then it's a big question. It's a big request. It's not like Jesus could throw some extra coins in here. And so maybe to see if he had the faith, and you probably, Anna, are right on. I think there's more to it, though. I think there's more. Kurt?
Well, my wife says I like to argue, so I'd say that I don't always see it being the obvious. That's what's really needed.
Okay.
You don't really know what someone wants. You know, a homeless person might not want a home.
Okay.
Somebody that's bankrupt might not want money.
Okay.
It might be something more, so I'm not sure it is always obvious.
And I think you're really onto something there, Kurt. He says somebody who's homeless might not want a home. Somebody who's bankrupt might not want money. What are the dangers? Let's just say that this man's request is what it is, and we just assumed that, and we didn't ask the question. Let me just go give him his sight. What are the dangers of this man receiving his sight? What are some of the repercussions of that? All kinds of good things, but what are some of the bad things?
He'll lose his income because he's a beggar.
Yeah. Yeah, and nobody really wants to sit on the edge of the road, but it probably was pretty productive. It probably was, and comparatively speaking, to going out and working 40, 50, 60 hours a week, he probably was doing pretty well. Now, it was humbling, it was probably humiliating, but in reality, he probably was doing okay. I don't know what it was like back then, but I read an article recently that said the average beggar out on the streets makes $400 a day. $400. Now, who's going to go and get a 40-hour-a-week job working like crazy, knowing that they might not even make that? So likely they won't make that. And so there was some familiarity to what he had going on. This is what I'm used to. We don't know how long he was blind, but probably a significant amount of time. And so this is all I've ever known. And if you give me back my sight, I'm going to embark upon a whole new, scary adventure. What are some other things that might be part of that, Doug?
Our sight can sometimes lead us to sin.
Good, that's good. And we don't know if that was going through the man's mind, but certainly to have your sight is indeed a blessing. And we who have our sight, we understand that. But there also are, we who have our sight, we recognize that there are some dangers to having our sight. And there would be some times that it would probably be more beneficial to pluck our eyes out, as Jesus said. Christine? Okay, a model for prayer. That's why Jesus did that? Yeah, to make your request known. You have not because you ask not. Okay, good. So we understand that there are some, I think Kurt just put it well, sometimes the obvious isn't always what somebody wants. Somebody who's homeless may not want a home. Maybe this man, maybe he had family, we don't know. But now all of a sudden he not only has to, with sight, can't beg anymore, but now he's got responsibilities that are part of having a family and taking care of that family. And so there are some dangers, there are some scary things that are a part of being removed from that particular pattern of life and moving into what we might call a normal pattern of life. And that's scary. I heard it said that prisoners who have been in jail for most of their life and then get out, maybe they had a 50, 60-year sentence, and then they get out and they're 70, 80 years old, they actually, many of them will just take their life immediately. And many of them will then commit a crime in order to get put back in, because it's all they've ever known. And we look at that and say, you had your freedom, and you wanted to get back in, but it's all they've ever known, and they actually didn't want that freedom. And so here's a man who has the opportunity to have freedom potentially, but Jesus says to him, what is it that you really want? And I think it's a question that you and I, as believers, need to ask ourselves as we embark upon 2015. What is it that we really want? I think that if I were to say to you, listen, do you have some goals? Do you have some New Year's resolutions, some spiritual aspirations that you maybe put down on paper, or at least are in your brain? You probably, I hope everyone can think of something that you have a goal for in the new year. What I would ask you is that what you really want? Is that what you really, because it's very easy to say it, but is it what you really want? Because do you understand that there is a cost to spiritual growth? You understand that if you pray for patience, what's probably going to happen? You're going to get all kinds of trials. That's just the fact. That's the way that it works. If you pray that you would learn to trust God for your finances, what's probably going to happen? He's going to take your money, and you're going to live from paycheck to paycheck, or day to day, and you're going to be painless so that you can learn to trust Him. That's just the way that it works. And the Bible is not in the least bit silent about that. To ask God for the right things, which this man did, to ask Him for the right things, means that you and I are probably going to have some struggles as a result of it. And so, as we think about 2015, we need to count the cost. God, I really want this. I really want this to be, my life to be transformed in this way. I want this part of my life, this thing that has just plagued me for so many years. I want to give it over to you. Do you really want to? Because if you embark on that endeavor, it's like Jesus said, no one puts his hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God. He says, no one who's going to build a tower doesn't first count the cost to see if he has what he needs in order to complete that project. And so we need to count the cost. Do we really want that? And yes, God, I am willing to face all of the struggles that are going to be a part, all of the pain that is going to be a part of you working and forming this inside of me. James chapter 1 says this, count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. James just pulls no punches. Listen, you want to grow? You're going to face trials. You're going to face things that are going to test you and try you. And so I think the first question we had asked is, what do we really want God to do? And understand the cost involved with that. Number two, I think a very important question is, why do we want him to do it? New year, got our goals. Why do we want God to do what we want God to do? Let's just say that we conclude that yes, I'm willing to go through all of the pain and all of the heartache that might be a part of God forming this in me. But why is it that we want to do it? The story tells us here that immediately after this man was healed, that he got up and he did what? He followed Jesus. His healing, the miracle that occurred in his life, led this man to follow Jesus. Now, is that why we want God to do what we want him to do? Do we want him to mold us and shape us and do this thing inside us because it's going to make us more effective, powerful followers of Jesus Christ? Or do we want it maybe for selfish reasons? Remember, James says, you do not have because you do not ask, but you do not receive because you ask wrongly to spend it on your passions. You adulterous people, don't you know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. You don't have it because you don't ask, he says, number one. But you also don't have it because you ask so that you can just consume it upon your passions. You have an entirely selfish, fleshly reason for why you want this. I was talking to a lady this week, and she said her husband is he's got all of these various enslavements, and he's enslaved to drugs and pornography, and he just went down the list, and he says, I pray and I pray and I pray, and it's not going away, I just can't seem to have victory over it. And then she shared a bit more of her husband's testimony with me, and it became very, very clear that all of his reasons for wanting it are selfish. Drugs cost a lot of money, and he wants to have money. And pornography is enslaving, and it's hurting his relationship with others and with his wife, and so he just wants all that fixed. But when it all came down to it, he has no interest at all in following God. None whatsoever. Not even on his radar. Well, in other words, he's asking that he may consume it upon his passions. Not because, God, if you remove this, God, if you fix this, I could be a powerful follower of you. I could be an effective witness for you. Not even on his radar. So why do we want God to do it? In 2015, it's our attitude and our heart and our motive that God, I just want to bring glory to you. If this were gone, do you understand that some of the things that we want God to do, if he did them, we would walk away from him. You understand that? Tori, when she was little, she had I don't even know what it was, but a brain communication functioning problem. And she could think of concepts and conversations that she was not yet old enough to speak with her words. And it was an extreme source of frustration because we had Jen didn't know what in the world she was trying to say because her mouth couldn't form the words, but her brain could. Her brain was just way out of her mouth. And so she would temper tantrum. And she would get so angry, and she would. It was a very hard period in all of our lives. And one of the things that I believe finally turned it around is we had been praying, God, would you take this away? God, would you take it away? Tori's praying, God, would you take it away? Would you take it away? And finally, I felt like the Lord was just saying, you know what, Rusty? If your daughter didn't have this, she would have no reason every single day to cling to God in prayer. She would have no reason, no everyday, every moment realization and recognition. I need you, God. And so I began to just encourage Tori. Tori, every time that happens, would you just pray? Every time it's not happening, would you just pray? And today, Tori is a prayer warrior because God didn't take it away. And he finally has now. But he didn't then, and she hung on to that for a few years. And sometimes we pray, God, I just want you to take this away. I just want you to fix this. I want you to, and when it comes to sin, yeah, that's one thing we want to have, and he wants to take away. Sometimes our struggles, sometimes the stuff we want God to do in us is actually the very thing that's drawing us closer to you. And so why do we want you to do this, God? Why do we want you to fix this? Is I think another very important question. What do you want God to do? Why do you want him to do it? And then number 3, what are you going to do to be a part of the process? In 2015, what am I willing to do to be a part of the process? We know the verse, Philippians chapter 2, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God that works in you, both to willing to do his good pleasure. God's not going to do anything in our lives through osmosis, through you and I just kind of sitting back and just watching him do it. God does things in our lives as we cooperate with him in this task of molding and shaping us. We know that Romans chapter 8 says Romans chapter 8 verses 28 and 29 says we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. And we quote that all the time. But verse 29 tells us what that purpose is. For those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, Jesus Christ. That's his purpose. Everything that God's doing is to conform us to the image of his Son, Jesus Christ. And it's not for our benefit. It's not in terms of our earthly temporal benefit. It's not for our pleasure. It is to conform us to the image of his Son, Jesus Christ. And Paul tells Timothy, in light of that, train yourself for godliness. Train yourself for godliness. Paul is very often he uses terms that we can identify with fighting or training or physical exercise. Why? Because it's painful. Because it hurts. Because it's hard. And what am I willing to do? How serious am I about God? Okay, let's just say we answer number 1 and number 2 right. God, I just want you to do this because I want you. I'm willing to count the cost, and I want you to get the glory. I want to be a more powerful, effective follower of you. But number 3, we show how serious we are about it by showing what we're willing to demonstrate, what we're willing to do to make it happen. What steps am I willing to take? I shared with you a couple weeks ago. My pastor was counseling a man and woman, and I forget which one, but one of them had an affair with somebody at their workplace. And the other one had forgiven, and the relationship had been restored, and they're in counseling, and the pastor said, I believe it was the man, so are you still at that workplace? And the man said, yes. And then the pastor said, is that woman still there? And the man said, yes. The pastor said, if you're really serious, you're going to quit your job. If you're really serious about being God's man and restoring this relationship with you, you're going to quit your job. You're going to remove that temptation from your life. And as we go into 2015, I would suggest, and I know this is the case for me, and I'm sure it's the case for you, that in these areas that we want God to do something, it's going to take some drastic measures to remove the influences that are part of our lives in order for God to do his work. Because we cannot play with sin and keep it hanging around and at the same time say, God, I just want you to eradicate this in your life. How serious are we about this in 2015? And if we're serious, we're going to take some pretty drastic measures in order for God to do what he wants to do. And so I just want to encourage you. I don't know what those things are. I don't know what you're battling with or want God to do in your life. And for all of us, there might be some similarities, and for all of us, there might be some different things. But I want to challenge you to seek the Holy Spirit. And God, what are those things that you want me to get serious about and get out of my life? Because as long as you hang on to them, you'll be here in 2016 with the same exact struggle. Until you get serious, until all of us get serious about that's just going to be gone. And I'm going to get up early to spend time in God's Word. And I'm going to memorize Scripture. That I will hide God's Word in my heart. That I might not sin against God. We go right down through the list. And we've talked about these things for the last 3 years. And so I'm not going to remind you of all of them. But we know what those spiritual disciplines are that we need to be a part of. That we need to get serious about. if we want God to do something in our lives. And so that's what I'm going to share with you this morning. I want to show you a quick video that I think just kind of is a little bit of a sum up, wrap up summary of what I just talked about. And then as I'm showing this, please be prepared to share testimonies. Let me just get here. Let me just say this. I did pay for this video, but it would not download onto this, so it's going to say right on it, when it comes up on the screen, it's going to say for preview only. But I did actually pay for this, but it won't work, so I'm showing you the for preview only version of it, but I did not pirate it, just so you know that. I actually did do this legally.